let's start with the one that I'm personally I was fascinated by, the Dershowitz defamation lawsuit. You want to start with that?
Sure.
Okay. Now, for those of you who don't know, Alan Dershowitz is suing CNN for defamation for $300 million, $50 million in compensatory damages, and $250 million in punitive damages because of the coverage they did of him after he testified, or after he, testified, after he gave arguments against the impeachment of Donald Trump. The whole basis of his argument was that the act at the core of the impeachment would have to be a criminal act or criminal in nature. And then he went in to explain that it's not enough that the act would be for the reelection. If the president thought it was in the best interest of his reelection, that wouldn't suffice for impeachment. CNN then ran with the one segment of what he said, which was not itself modified or edited, but was not the entire statement, saying it can be justified. It's not impeachable if the president does it when he thinks it's in his best interest for reelection. Then the pundits on CNN went on with their nonsense that, Dershowitz thinks that even if it's a criminal act, it could be justified if the president thinks it's in his best interest for reelection. So, Robert, I did a video on it. I said it sort of sounds like defamation by omission, in that they didn't manipulate what they actually replayed, but they just played half of what he said, and then the pundits went on with their idiotic understanding of what he said. Do you think the defamation lawsuit itself holds any water as drafted, as formulated?
I didn't think it was the most compelling defamation claim that I've ever seen. I get why Dershowitz did it. He's still agitated, obviously, about how they interpreted his arguments and misconstrued some of his arguments clearly, and how they've been on bashing him nonstop. And he's been under wide-scale assault because of there's all the Epstein-related issues that he's facing, plus all of this. So I think he feels he's being attacked from multiple places and wanted to fight back. I thought, he of all people knew not to sue for that amount of money. So I assume he sued for that amount of money solely to get attention, that this is really about correcting the record but that's how, if I were representing him, I wouldn't have sued for any money. I would have just sued for declaratory relief that CNN made false statements about my arguments, just to make it clear that it was just about correcting the record. Suing for $300 million, puts him in the wrong territory. In my view, I just don't find that ever credible. I've never sued for that amount of money for any kind of case or claim. And even when you theoretically maybe had some sort of shot at that, it just looks bad to the court system. It makes it look like a petty argument between him and CNN, and he doesn't want to look. In my view, it's not in his political utility to look petty. So, but from a pure legal perspective, it's a marginal claim, because he's saying their opinion of my opinion was relying upon a misinterpretation of my opinion. That's not the cleanest, neatest defamation claim I've ever seen. So he's right that CNN misinterpreted his opinion. That is true. Whether or not that's sufficiently factual to get past the defamation issues is going to be for the, it'll be the luck of the draw with whatever court he gets, whatever judge he gets. It's the Southern District of Florida is where he filed suit. So there's a range of judges down there. Now, generally, those judges have been hostile to defamation claims. They kicked claims against BuzzFeed on defamation grounds. They've found excuses not to have defamation claims move forward. I assume, and party sued there, of course, too, because there's no anti-SLAPP statute in Florida. So he won't owe CNN's legal fees if he loses early on in the case. He probably maybe 1 in 3 shot at getting past a motion to dismiss. It'll depend on what judge he gets. Like I said, it wasn't the strongest defamation claim I've ever seen.
Because, this is the issue I had with it, is he says the pundit's interpretation of what I said was wrong based on not a falsification, not a misstatement of what I said, just not playing it in its entirety, in the entire context. And so, to me, when I read it, it reads like, okay, so they're idiots with idiotic spin based on an improper understanding of what he actually said. They look like idiots. To go from there, he throws in the words malicious, reckless disregard for the truth. But bottom line, though, they're just offering a very erroneous interpretation of what he said, which is untenable in the first place. And I think we all understood that the issue that people had with him in the first place was that he said that it had to be a crime in the first place, and everybody disagreed with that. So I just don't see how it succeeds ever. And then $300 million. It's as preposterous in my mind as Austin Powers asking for $100 billion. Like there was no allegation of damages, no allegation of even real
like
suffering.
This, right? 100 billion. He put his finger like this. Mini.
Yeah, no.
Austin Powers. Yeah.
It's a meme amount. Like, and I know people hate CNN, and I consider myself to be among them. CNN it's just the worst in terms of misinformation, right up there with MSNBC. But even still, you don't sue for $300 million when you've suffered no meaningful damages just because they're misrepresenting an argument that you openly stated to the entire world.
Agreed.
Have you ever seen? I mean, and some people are saying, well, it's not. Defamation by omission happens all the time. Have you ever seen a case where there was an actual successful defamation claim, not because they misstated what the person actually said, but because they didn't present it in its entire context?
Yes. Those claims exist, but usually it's really clearly factual. Basically what he's saying is relaying what my argument is not a matter of opinion, but is a matter of fact. And that's a bit of a reach. Because you're right. Normally when that's the issue, when someone's saying you misstated my opinion and that thus becomes a factual matter, your misstatement of my opinion, they've actually misstated it. Like they put quotes that don't exist, which is the case he cited, by the way, in his complaint. He cited a case that's not really on fours with his. But there are examples, but normally it's stuff like in some part of you clarify. Well, here would be someone who has a good defamation claim. President Trump against pretty much everybody, including Joe Biden, who has said that both sides, that the Nazis were good people at Charlottesville. When he specifically earlier on in that the statement that they cite, he says, I disavow the Nazis and the racists and the Klansmen, all those are bad people. Then about the statute, that's an example where they're quoting him correctly when he's talking later on about both sides of the statute issue, but they're misleading because they're omitting and deliberately putting words in his mouth that he deliberately refuted. That would be a clearer, cleaner example of what Dershowitz is talking about. It's a little more unusual when people make and misinterpret people's arguments all the time. So misinterpreting an opinion with your own opinion is not quite what defamation typically reaches.
Well, that's it, because I said it's like it's not even the judgment that they quoted involved putting in quotes something that someone actually didn't say. Where I said in this case they're just straw manning Dershowitz's arguments. It wasn't. I didn't view it as being defamatory in any way. It's just sort of the political spin that I would expect from people who are, ideological adversaries, so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, and the amount, but whatever, 300 million. It's an interesting thing. It would have been better. All that he wanted was the publicity, I suspect, to let everybody know how bad CNN really is. You didn't have to sue for 300 million. I don't think that gets more press attention. I think that just gets more press ridicule, or at the very least looks less credible before the judges. Before the public.
I think that's his interpretation of is that he would only get attention if he sued for a crazy amount. I think it's it's probably not a complete misreading, but it's what I guess you could call it the Lin Wood effect at this point. You sue for an absurd amount of money, and then often people will think you won that amount of money because the settlement's secret. And it sets a precedent. Hey, if I want to get public attention to meet someone lying about me, I should sue for a crazy amount of money. But you're right. Most people, particularly definitely in the court system, in the court of public opinion, when they see those crazy amounts, Larry Klayman does this all the time, sues for $10 billion. It's like, okay, that just tells me your suit's not a real suit is how I read that, even if it is a legit suit, if you looked at the facts. So I agree with you. I don't like that. I think it's a bad idea. I think it undermines the core of your argument, but I think that's why he did it. I think he thought no one would pay any attention to him suing unless he sued for a crazy sum of money.
That's it. It's the salmon effect, except, in salmon, you're dealing with a minor who is receiving death threats, who's getting harassed at university. We fell down, Barnes. And in this case, we're dealing with Dershowitz. I don't know what speaking gigs he lost, but I guarantee you they weren't $50 million.
No.